I first came up with the idea for the film Genesis about 2 or 3 years ago. I was looking for an idea that could be done cheaply and containably for a feature film. I'd worked on a few short films. I'd done a master's. I've taught filmmaking to undergraduates, and I've been working for 20 odd years in post-production production and other areas. And I've been struggling for years, basically, trying to work out how I can communicate the ideas that I'm interested in and get films, at least try to get a film in a similar vein to the people that I admired, whether it be David Lynch, or later on Ari Aster's, Robert Eggers, people like that. People who are just generally trying to explore probably transcendent ideas or ideas to do with deep psychology within film. That's what I'm interested in. That's what I'm exploring. So I came up with the idea of Genesis about 3 years ago. I wrote a vomit draft of a script. I workshopped some of those scenes with actors, some of which went really well and some of it which needed a bit more work. One thing that was important to me was that I exhausted the idea. Sometimes I found when I've done some writing, particularly in the previous screenplay that I've written, that I need to go back and revisit. I can get taken with a very strong idea, but then actually in the writing process, I find that I don't really explore it as fully as it should be done. So this time around, I've approached things slightly differently. Rather than just jumping straight into a vomit draft, although I had done that with an earlier draft, I actually created a beat board, basically, which is on the board behind me there, as you can see. And the idea of this was to basically just get an overview of the entire story. This is something that, again, David Lynch has recommended, but I've also seen people like Nicholas Winding Refn use this. It's a documentary that his wife did on him shooting Only God Forgives. And you can see him staring at his beat board as he tries to understand the whole film. And it does give you an overview where you can literally see your entire film in front of you, and you can see where it's working, where its weaknesses are, how the general flow is going. So it's been really, really helpful to do that. And then I've taken it into Final Cut, and I've been working in Final Cut, basically starting to put that into scenes. The other thing I've been trying to do as well that's a bit different than the writing that I've done before is previously, and this is something I think happens with vomit drafts, is you tend to overwrite. So you think about, I'm writing a scene here, they're in this area here, I need a bridging scene between that and this next moment, this next big beat, and you really don't. What I found is actually if I focus solely on individual scenes and the importance of those individual scenes, and then go back and add in between scenes if I feel they're needed, it just feels it's a lot tighter and it's a lot more concise. And I think what we do when we watch films is we fill in those details. I've gone back and been watching a lot of older films that for some reason or other have resonated with me. Recently I rewatched Scarface, and I haven't seen it in years. And what's interesting to me watching that is kind of how little there is in it, in a sense. And by which I mean that there are a small handful of key scenes or key scenarios that are linked together. But you in your head, when you remember these films, you just remember this whole other world. And I think it's because of what's implied behind the scenes that you're seeing and what we bring to it as a viewer as well. So that was an interesting thing to do as well. I've also been watching all the Mission Impossibles, which I do like as action films. And again, you think of these as like massive Hollywood sprawling adventures, but actually, if you actually break it down into how many sequences there are, how many individual kind of moments of events, it's actually not that many. There's like, maybe 3, 4 or something like that. So that's really interesting to bear in mind. And it's also useful for me when it comes to writing and working on my own film, which I'm doing now. I need to bear that in mind as I'm doing it. So that's where it's started with, and where I am with the script. Going beyond the script, the other areas I'm involved with at the moment is I'm working with a producer over in Amsterdam. This is someone that I have been working with on and off for about 20 years. He's a good friend of mine. We originally met each other in Soho drinking clubs, most notably the Colony, which is somewhere that I used to be a member of back when I used to drink. You either come out of the Colony sober or in a box, and I decided to choose the former. So I got in touch with him again, Sky Jordan. He's a real big film buff. He's an older guy, but he knows a lot about early Hollywood cinema and a lot about television as well. And we've been talking about dramas and things like that. He had some people interested in low budget horrors in the States that were looking to do streaming with independent low budget horrors, and that was perfect for what I'm looking for. So I put together a one pager, and then I put together a treatment, which I sent over to them, and they've given us basically more or less a letter in principle, basically distributing our film when it actually gets made. The idea is obviously that everybody makes a bit of money and at least gets their money back. What I want to do is to make this so it works, so I can continue to make films. I think there's a real gap in the market for this. And I've seen people who are doing this successfully in terms from a business point of view are on about the third or fourth feature film at a low budget level. And by low budget, I'm talking like below 30K. And so it must be working if they're getting investment again to make their third or fourth feature. I've done loads of short films, but I've done three what I would consider proper short films, which I've done up to recently in the last 4 years or so. And now I feel ready as a filmmaker to make a feature. Now, some people say, why bother wasting money on short films? Why not just go straight into doing a feature? But I didn't feel I had my voice in place. I didn't feel that I'd really got to know how to speak and say how I wanted to say things confidently. And I guess you can do that on a shoot, but for my mind, it'd be very easy to get swayed by other people, your DOP or your actors or everybody else involved in production. Whereas if you know your voice and you know what you want to say and you know the tone of what you're going for, through previous experience doing shorts, then it makes you have a clearer vision as a director. So that's what I'm hoping, and that's what my intention was, creating those shorts. And I just knew at the end of Genesis, and not Genesis, that's what I'm working on, at the end of Foreclosure, I just knew that the time was right and I'm ready. And I'm not getting any younger. One of the other things I would say is that a mistake I've made, apart from 20 years of being a barfly, one of the other mistakes I've made is to feel that I have to know absolutely everything about every part of the filmmaking process before I become a director. And when you reach your mid-50s, you realize that the way I'm going, I'm basically going to be ready to make a film on my deathbed. And that's not really going to work either. So now's the time to do it. So that's why I'm doing it. Where I'm at the moment with actors, I've got a cast of 4 principal characters, and then there's a 5th character who's also essential to the drama that I haven't actually cast yet, but it's got a key role in the story. Working with 3 people I worked with a number of times before. I know them well as actors. You develop a shorthand working with actors, and you get to know people's strengths and weaknesses and their kind of characteristics, and you know that they are right for characters. So there's 3 people I'm working with for 3 of the central roles. There's a 4th person, and there's a young actress that I've met through online sources, Mandy and Starnell. And she has a very particular look. That was the first thing that stood out to me. I was looking for someone who had a slight uncanniness but classicalness to their appearance. And she's an attractive young lady. So I'm not saying when I say uncanny, I'm not sort of dismissing her physical appearance there. The other thing was I saw her performances. I saw some of her work in her showreel, and she had a very grounded, naturalistic style, and had a sense of being a bit like an old soul in a young body, which is exactly what I needed for this role. I'm yet to do any rehearsals with her. I had a Zoom chat with her I wanted to get a sense of who she was as a person, talk to her about the project, make sure that she was okay, make sure that she basically understood that I was okay, and to understand what the project was about, and just get a sense of who I am. It's sort of a meet and greet thing to sort of just to sound each other out, really. And that went very well. She's requested for me to send her some example films and some ideas. So I've suggested she take a look at Badlands for the Sissy Spacek character, which is something I've had in my mind for her character. Also to look at Midnight Mass, the TV series on Netflix, which I think is brilliant and very much taps into similar themes that I'm looking at for Genesis. And also some St. Vincent videos as well, because Annie Clark from St. Vincent has an uncanniness to her that is otherworldly, which I really want to sort of bring into her character. It's a very difficult character to get right, but I've got confidence that she can do that. We're going to meet up in a couple of weeks and run through a rehearsal. It's a soft audition in a sense, but I consider her, from talking to her and from seeing her work, I consider her for the role. I just need to do some due diligence and actually do a rehearsal with her just to see how it all goes and make sure that she is right for the part and that she's happy to play the part as well. So that will be happening in a couple of weeks. I'm looking forward to that. Then I'm going over to Amsterdam at the end of June to meet up with my producer, to chat to him about finance and basically get some finance secured for the film. I've already got some secured for a test shoot we're doing at the start of September. What my idea is, and this is something that I discussed with Jordan, the producer, is we're going to shoot one of the key scenes, the dinner scene, over a weekend, 2 or 3 days in the start of September. This has been really helpful to me in a number of ways. Number one, it gets something that we can show to other investors to drum up a bit of buzz and get people interested in it, and to make sure that that everything's working and we're on the right tracks, rather than doing everything, straight away into a full shoot period. And then there may be things you want to tweak afterwards, and you can't do that obviously after you've shot the entire film. So it will help us sort of nail any gotchas without losing too much money, if that is the case. The second thing it will help us with is that it will be a scene that we're shooting for the actual film itself. And that really helps me as a director, because I think for years I wanted to make a feature film since I was a teenager, and I've built it up in my head as such a big thing over the years, more and more and more, that it almost became like this impossible door to get through, like the door of the law in the trial. I was just standing outside waiting, learning editing software and lenses and the exposure triangle, and you'll never get through the door. But what is useful to me is it actually is kind of dissolved that entry point to actually making the film, because I'm making the film for 2 days in September, and then I'm just continuing to make it next spring when we'd have the main shoot. And that's been really helpful psychologically, because now I just feel, rather than thinking as the film as something I'm going to make, I'm literally in the process of making it now. I'm in pre-production, I'm in writing, I'm in prep. That's what I'm doing. There are a couple of complications that come with that. Number one is that anything that I get together for the shoot in September has to be right for the whole film. And the main thing for that is location. So at the moment, I'm looking at locations. I've got one place that I'm keen to shoot in. I need to contact them and get in touch with them. They're about an hour away. I'm going to adjust the script as well to suit the location. Now, these things aren't important to the underlying story, and so I need to be flexible in terms of what I'm going to allow to be changed in the story for practicalities, real world practicalities, what's compromising the core of what I'm trying to do. Only I know that as a director, but I'm pretty confident that that's what's going to happen. And one of the other things with that is that there are opportunities that can occur through restrictions. So there are some ideas that's come to me through being limited by location that could actually be really, really helpful to the story. So, for example, the main story is a body swap genre. As a couple move next door to another couple, and without going into too much detail, they're slowly trying to take them over. They take them over psychologically first, and then bodily. And this is the idea. And they sort of jump from people to people over a number of days. It's kind of like has a slightly vampiric vibe, but it also has a similar vibe to Funny Games by Haneke. It's this kind of feel to it. It's sort of grounded psychological horror with very strong biblical undertones. It's just absolutely fascinating reading into that area and trying to think of a way that you can make that in a grounded way in the UK. And I'm really excited about how that's going. It's going, that's going really, really well. But one of the ideas that's come to me through that process is originally it was going to be two houses next to each other in a suburban street. And then you start getting to production, you think, well, that's going to be very difficult to do. I can't close off a street. I can't control noise. How am I going to rent two houses next to each other to shoot? Obviously, you don't have to do that. You can find ways of working around that, but it just becomes more of a headache. And in previous experience, when I was originally doing my first short films years ago, one of the problems that I kept running into as a director who ends up having to wear many hats, as a lot of people do, is you can very quickly end up most of your time doing production management and about 1% of your time actually doing directing. And that's a very, very dangerous trap to fall into, because then you end up just getting coverage. You just get coverage and you're not happy with what you're doing. So the important thing, I think, is to try to think about how I can adapt things to get everything out of the way from a production point of view as much as possible, so I can focus on the directing, on the storytelling with the camera and with the cast. So the idea of actually is to moving away from a suburban setting to having, say, a farmhouse or a cottage in an isolated location. And then the trick then is like, well, how do you get neighbours in that kind of place? Well, one of the places I've looked at has got like an outhouse building that could work. But if that doesn't work, what I thought another option would be to have a caravan. So these others are they're very transient. So they park up in an adjacent field in a caravan and make friends. And I thought that brings another level to it that I hadn't even considered initially. And so in this way, some of your restrictions can actually bring a bit more richness to the film itself as you bring it to life. One of the other things I've been thinking about that I need to consider is how I'm going to shoot stuff during the main shoot next year, which will be over 3 weeks, hopefully 3 weeks, depending on the amount of money I get. And where I made errors before, and this is another good reason for doing short films, is I've overshot. I've created too many setups, too many shots, and I need to sort of bring things back and simplify things. And that actually is not about losing creativity. It's just about refining. There's a beauty in efficiency. There's a cleanness to the storytelling that cuts away the fat. So we did a shot in the last shot I did. There's a key moment in the story that's very, very uncomfortable, and it's the father and the daughter, the grown up daughter, having a conversation, and he talks about when she was younger and he used to tickle her, and then he actually tickles her as an adult, and it's very weird and very unsettling. And I thought, just intuitively, I felt that the best way of doing this was to do it all in one shot, all in a wide, so that we don't get any relief from a cut, because cuts can give you a sense of relief. They can release tension, as well as increase tension in other ways. But what they also do is they bring about a sense of immediacy and a sense of real timeness, because if there is no cuts, you feel more immersed in the presence of the situation. Now, you have to do other things. I workshopped it with actors, with the two actors, and we made sure that there were no spaces in the performance. They're just these tiny little moves and adjustments that the actors do. And we came to this through rehearsal, and they're beautiful. They just give little breathing spaces in the dialogue, but they never stop. They're always doing something, and it just brings the scene to life. And so this is what I want to do with the feature. I want to kind of lean more into doing some longer shots in places, and including for the key dining room scene, which I'm going to be shooting in this part of the later part of this year. To just tell the story within the frame. And this is something that some filmmakers do as their trademark. People like Roy Andersson, who's a great Swedish director. He tells everything within the frame. And this is something that I think is something that can be explored. Now, I don't want that to be my style or what I do, but I think that from a rule book, a visual rule book for the film in terms of the cinematic language for the film, I think this is something that that I'm going to do. And the other thing I'm doing in the writing of it as well is I want to give each of the characters a monologue in it as well. This is something that it just feels like the right thing to do. Maybe this is partly inspired by Midnight Mass, but that was very monologue heavy. But this, I just think it gives a chance for each of the characters to really signify who they are and what they're about within this monologue scene. And I think it would be a really nice way to go about it, and to probably maybe have those as just single oneers, basically. So I'll see how that goes, and that's the idea for now. So next stages are I need to contact my DOP. I need to have a chat to him. We're going to be shooting on a red. He has a red. I've worked with him the last two of the last 3 shorts I've done. I shot the middle one myself. Just I couldn't get anyone else in the short period of time I had to do it. But I've also got myself a red as well. And so what I want to do is talk to him and say, well, we got 2 reds now. So how can we bring that into the mix? One thing I don't want to do is to shoot multicam, because multicam you just end up getting coverage. You don't compose your shots. But it could be handy. I spoke to a friend yesterday who said what we could do is have the 2 cameras mounted next to each other, and one just getting a close-up while the other one gets a wide. And that gives me room in the edit. Anything that can help me kind of trim down the time and then enable me to concentrate on the filming of the story in the limited time we have, the better, really. So that's that. And the purpose of this video diary is really to keep track of things and see how things are going, both for my own benefit and for anybody else that might want to look back on this as a filmmaker looking to progress from short films to doing their own feature, to see if anything that I'm coming across in this process is useful to them, just maybe able to help them. And it's just a record for me as well.